some more. So, thanks all for being here. And I'm going to introduce Jessica Monroe briefly, because it's more interesting to hear her talk about her stuff than me talk about her talking about her stuff. So, just kind of give a little tiny bit of background. As you can see, Jessica is a painter of the natural world. Most of the recent paintings, at least recent works at least, are very much focused on the natural world, the environment, and especially the environment in which we all live. I think these are all, if I'm right, local, except the flowers are a little bit of a chrysanthemum. But the work that she's been doing is not just focused on kind of the surface details, what we see when we see a photograph of something, but very much what's underneath, the kind of animating spirit behind landscapes or behind the natural world. Now she's been making paintings for more than 30 years, and as I see in my notes, has a Bachelor of Arts from Southwestern University, also studied at New York University in the Art Institute of Chicago, and is today a professional artist, which is a pretty amazing thing to be able to do in the current market. And making work that really expresses her understanding of the natural world and the energies that enliven the natural world, that give life to flora and fauna, not just that superficial element to it. So rather than stumble on through that, I'm going to pass it off to Jessica to talk about it.
Thank you so much. Yay! Thank you for being here. I didn't prepare anything specific. Kind of the ideas are they're all over the place. So please interrupt me with questions as I'm going to go. I'm going to start here. We might kind of walk around. I'll share with you a little bit about my process, where I come from, kind of what's important to me. But please interrupt, and for sure afterwards, you'll get a chance to ask questions. So I've been painting. I'm from Edinburgh originally. I grew up, I spent a lot of time at my grandparents' place in Lasada. It was this really small farmhouse on 13 acres, 40 acres were farmed. There were goats and chickens and cats and dogs, and there was no air conditioning, and we spent all of our time in the trees. It was amazing. It was amazing. Because when you slept, the windows were open. And so there wasn't a separation between the inside and the outside. When it was cold, you felt cold. When it was hot, you felt hot. You felt the breeze as you're going to sleep. You heard the birds wake up. You wake up with the birds as they're waking up. To me, it was absolutely magical. And I really genuinely feel like a huge part of my adult life is trying to get back to that space, to recreate it, to kind of tap and kind of question, like, what is it that was so important that I don't get on a daily basis when I'm just driving around, surrounded by concrete, surrounded by ads, surrounded by telephone poles. There's something that's very kind of soul-crushing about that experience, and we just kind of get numb to it. And so my art is a way for me to kind of get back to that space. For a very long time, I avoided the subject matter, because when I looked at the art world was sexy and clever and raw and punk, and I loved it, but that wasn't my authentic voice. And I was really worried that as a woman painting nature, and also somebody who really revels in beauty, that those things are all going to count against me, which they did and have. And I had to go, you know what, ignore all of that. This is where my heart's calling. This is what's really important. And I finally just kept going. And so one of the things I would say to you guys as you're working, because is everybody here doing art at some level? Yeah? Okay. So the biggest thing about doing art is not how to paint, but it's what to paint, right? That's like the biggest, you're just like, and there's so much cool stuff out there, and sometimes you want to try to do it so that other people will think you're really cool, but maybe that's not your authentic self. And so the trick is to really cut away at those things that are trying to push you and pull you in these different directions, and listening to going, wow, this is where I'm walking, this is where I'm being pulled. And sometimes it's very counterintuitive to where you think you're supposed to go, right? Or what you think other people are going to respect or want. When I was out of college, I was teaching high school, and I spent all of my, teaching is really hard, teachers, right? So hard, especially if you're an artist and you have all this energy and you want to create, but you're there constantly for everybody else, and a lot of energy was going out. I loved my students, I loved teaching, but it was very exhausting. But what was really draining was that I spent most of my time indoors in a concrete block. So artificial air with the air conditioning, artificial light. It was really hard. And so in order to feel better, what I noticed is I went out to nature and to paint in nature. So I went to the nature centers and I took my paintings. And because so much of where we're at ecologically, we're in a mess ecologically in this world right now. Because we go into these spaces to think in terms of like, what can I take from this space? When we're constantly thinking about me, what can I take from it, it creates an imbalance. And so we don't think about, are we taking too much? Is there an imbalance? Is this unhealthy? And so when I went into these spaces, it was very important for me to not take. Even though I wasn't physically taking, I wanted to walk in with the spirit of respect, a spirit of curiosity. So I'm not trying to take a pretty picture that I can then later sell, because then it's about me. It's about what I think is important in this space. And the really amazing thing about art is you can use it as a form of exploration. And so I would go into these spaces and I used watercolor, I used graphite, I used charcoal, I used pastels, and I just would walk until I found a space that felt, oh, the energy here feels interesting. And I don't know if it was the light or the birds or what was going on, but I just walk until it was time to stop. I'd set up, I'd breathe, I'd look, and then the marks responded to what I saw. I don't know how else to describe that. It sounds odd, but it's very based in process. I wasn't trying to recreate the scene. I was trying to have a conversation with this space. And in doing that, I learned a lot about kind of the way nature functions. And that, kind of got me to learn more about ecological design and what it was, learning about from naturalists and ecologists, what it was I was actually looking at, how it functioned. But one of the things people tell me about my work specifically is that it's got a lot of movement and not a lot of lines are delineated. Everything's just kind of mixed. And what I told people as they have told me that, because it's not something that I set out to do. It's not a style I try to emulate or create. I am not creative. I am not creative. I am not clever. I am just painting what I see. And when you look at all of everything kind of being mixed together, that's the way the world works, right? That's the way the natural world works. It's this constant movement. It's this constant exchange of energies. And so it's about, is anybody here familiar with Giacometti, the sculptor? Yes. Yes. Do you love him? I can see it. Yes. I do too. Anybody else familiar with him? He's known for his sculptures, but I fell in love with his drawings. And I remember reading it. Oh yeah, I see that. I first saw a drawing in person when I was in Madrid, and I did a semester in Madrid, and I took an art history class in the museums. And in the Thyssen, there's one of his drawings. And I was late to this class I was running, and I finally found my class, and I turned over there and I went, oh, because I was so excited to see it in person. And my teacher, she noticed that I got real excited. I was like, as soon as y'all come in, and she was like, sí, yo sé. Because it is like really, really exciting, very different than anything else. And I think when I heard him talk about it or write about it, he writes about trying to capture what he's really seeing. And if you look at his figures, there's not a separation between, or a very clear delineation between the space and the figure. It kind of goes back and forth. Well, that's reality, right? Our cells are porous. Our bodies are porous. Energy and moisture and air, I mean, these are kind of porous things. And so our conception of these being separate are actually an illusion, right? And so when you go into these spaces and you really pay attention and you try to be very respectful of what you're seeing and responding to what you're seeing, then that's what ends up coming out. And I think the reason I was so excited about his is because even from a very early age, I recognized that authenticity in his work. That he's not trying to be clever. He's not trying to do a style, right? He's just trying to be as authentic as possible to the subject that's right in front of him. And I think that that is something that I really care about in my work. Yeah. So, are there any questions so far? Okay, cool. So I started going into these spaces and doing what I call meditation paintings. These meditation paintings I have continued doing, and they form the foundation for all of my other work. I really see beauty as kind of a guidepost towards something that's truthful. And you hear mathematicians talk about that, this elegant design, and there's a beauty in this sort of truth. And so my work does work with beauty a lot, because I think that there's something really important there. And even though when I was in art school, beauty was really looked down on, I kind of went, no, there's something really important there. And when I go out into these spaces, that's what strikes me. And so that's what I respond to. So here you can see this is a pretty old piece. This actually I did when I was up at the Art Institute of Chicago. And I first started kind of playing around with this very loose movement. This I did this year in my backyard. And so I continue to do this. Whenever I kind of get out of where I need to be, I go back to those meditation paintings. This summer I did a residency in Corpus. I was in Spoil Island, which is a man-made island in the middle of the Laguna Madre, and there was a off-the-grid research facility. And I started feeling really nervous because I was selected for this residency. And I was worried that I wasn't going to be impressive, right? Like, people are looking at me, and I want it to come out well. So anytime I feel, have you guys ever felt that when you're making a piece and you're like, oh, you really want it to be good, and then the more you want it to be good, like the less it gets to where you want it to be?
Yeah, of course.
That happens to me. And I've been painting for over 30 years, and I'm professional. I think that that's really normal, that pressure, wanting it to be a certain way. And so whenever I get to that place, set it aside, and I go to the meditation paintings. I get back into my process, and I get really, really comfortable with not being impressive. I try to get really, really comfortable with making lots of mistakes. And then I'm able to go back.
So do you work on, I guess, like cooking, that go to the back burner and get a couple other things going to take some of that energy in another direction?
I always have at least 5 pieces going at the same time, and there are pieces in my studio that are 5+ years old that I've set aside and haven't quite gone back to, and I may go back. So absolutely, yeah. Sometimes I go back to them, sometimes I don't. Trying to think. This one. I mean, I was in Chicago 15 years ago. I just pulled it out. It's been on my shelf, for a really long time. So I think there's something kind of nice about that, having the pieces around you, because they all tell part of the same story and they kind of inform the process in different ways. Another thing that's been a big part of this past year is reading. And I do a lot of reading, I do a lot of writing in the studio. I know Scott was talking about what it is to be a professional artist. I just happened to have this show and another concurrent show at the same time. I saw Scott like a couple of months ago, was it? And I was like, I don't even know, what I'm doing here. For months, from November until I put these shows up, and I just put the other show up a week ago, I was working often 16-hour days, often 5, 6, 7 days in a row, not leaving my house, not seeing anybody. It is very, very intense. And while I'm doing that, and it feels like a marathon, you show up to the easel exhausted, sick, you don't want to be there, you push through it. When you get too far on this one piece, I switch to another piece so that I'm always moving forward. And then a lot of it is I'm listening to audiobooks that are sharing ideas that are relevant to what I am working on. And they can be very disparate. So this show is called Cosmic Dance. Does anybody know who Thomas Merton is? Yeah? Thomas Merton, at his time when he wrote, he was very, very famous. He was like New York Times bestseller, but a lot of people don't know who he is right now because I think he passed away in the 50s. He was a monk, he was a theologian. He was one of the first high-profile Christian writers who introduced the United States to Zen Buddhism. And so he actually died at a convention in Asia, I'm not sure where exactly. Really, really interesting, just beautiful writer. And as I'm painting one of the pieces, he talks about this cosmic dance. And basically what he's saying is what most people think is really, really important, God doesn't think is important. And what God thinks is the most important, we won't give a second thought to. And it's this stuff. It's the stuff that inspires me, is what he's saying. And he's saying this is the cosmic dance. These are this is the playground of the divine. And if we could just set aside the things that we are so focused on and spend more time here, basically we'd all be a lot happier. As I'm painting, I hear him, this passage where he's talking about this, I just start crying. Because at my core, I recognize that what he's talking about is what I have been drawn to and painting for the past couple decades. There's a new for me, it's been around for a while, but there's a book called Braiding Sweetgrass. And beautiful, beautiful book written by an indigenous woman who's an ecologist, and she writes about indigenous wisdom and philosophy. Completely changed my life. Like completely, like as I'm going through this and painting and listening, there's so many times when I have to stop because what she's presenting completely changes the way I thought I knew the world and what actually makes sense and how it's different than all these things that we just take for granted. And all of that somehow makes its way into this work. Yeah.
So I have an art appreciation question.
Sure.
Unit 6, themes,
Yeah.
where the subject matter here is nature.
Yeah.
And you mentioned this dance. Could we frame this not just with your identity, but a search for joy then and maintaining joy in your world? Would that fit for a theme? If I'm going to write a PowerPoint on it, my Unit 6 assignment.
I like that. So joy is definitely a big part of it. This piece right here, though, or this collection right here, if I were to say what is the theme, I'd say life, not just nature. This is a series that I did with another piece that's actually not here right now. And it's when it was in response to the Uvalde shooting. And it was a subject that very much has to do with life, very much has to do with the systems that we accept as normal, But it was a very difficult subject matter. And what I ended up doing was, I didn't just look at Uvalde, but I looked at, within the United States, every incident that included a child 12 and under in which somebody died, in which a child died. Just 12 and under within the United States in that year. And that's what you're seeing. So each flower is a person. And so it's this idea that even very difficult subjects you can address with beauty. And what I've come to understand in my work is that it's not just about celebrating nature and that joy that's part of nature, but creating these spaces where we're able to sit with and contemplate. So if you look at this and you can sit with and contemplate, what does it mean? What does it mean that I live in a country where this is our reality? This is not the reality in most countries in the world. If I look at this, what does it mean that this is part of the life that I am also part of? And so they become spaces for contemplation, is a little bit more how I think about it. I'm strongly, I have a strong reaction historically in art history. I have a very strong connection or reaction or appreciation for the abstract expressionists. So when I look at an abstract expressionist, it becomes an experience. And it's not about what's clever, again, right? It's not about what's sexy. It's about how am I responding to this space. And that's how I feel when I go out into nature. And so when I think about these pieces, it's more that. It's more kind of creating this space. And my newer work is more in line with that. This is some of my older work, the newer work that's out there. They're intended to hold space for contemplation, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question? I don't know if it does.
Yeah, but then I probably have another one too. History and other things, because that was another frame in Mark Guyton's book or something, where art about art as well, when you're tying it into history. So there's two names, like Monroe with his Broadway Boogie Woogie and all that super clean stuff, but when he was doing the chrysanthemum,
we were just talking about that.
Overt connection or not?
No, I never knew about them.
What about Richard Diebenkorn? Because I mean, the tall, skinny Giacometti, he's very linear in his drawing in charcoal and loose but painterly.
Okay.
And then I'm more of a Diebenkorn person with the shape and juicy like your frost and your graham cracker or something like that. Yeah. Does he factor in too? Because he wasn't cool, I think.
No, I'm not familiar with those artists. No, but I want to be. Will you share that with me?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah.
I kind of just started getting back into landscape painting as well, and kind of exploring. I think we all have like a very grand picture of like landscapes, mountain ranges,
Sure.
and rivers, valleys, and we live in the valley, which is has its own set, landscape and climate, and animal life, plant life.
Yeah.
How do you suggest kind of getting out of the mundanity of like, well, I see this every day, you know what I mean? You pass by it every day.
Yeah.
And then to like really sit and like, okay, appreciate it, and for how different it actually is,
But it's not an effort for me. No. And I'll tell you, there's a nature photographer who's a friend of mine, and we were at Sal de Rey. Have you been to Sal de Rey?
Not yet.
If you want kind of an impressive landscape for this area, go to Sal de Rey. It's beautiful. It's a salt lake, so it's got some cool reflections. And we were walking back, and she pointed out this cactus, and she said, see where it's been eaten here, those, the spines are longer, it's fighting back. And I think that for me, well, I love this landscape because I grew up in this landscape. It's very tied to my identity and my memory growing up, and I found a lot of joy in that space, and so that's what kind of drives me. I can paint grasses. I mean, my biggest issue is that I would take pictures of like grasses. And I don't know why I was taking pictures of grasses. I found them so beautiful. And for years before I actually painted them, you know, and I would think like, oh my gosh, I'm crazy. Why am I doing this? And then several years later, I had somebody on Facebook that I don't even know text me or send me a picture of some grass and said, I was out hunting and I saw this and thought of your paintings. And so I think I spend time with naturalists. They have taught me how to see this area in a really beautiful way. We have the Thornton Forest, which is just, it is very unique. There's a toughness in it that I find fascinating. If you go to the Mission Hike and Bike Trail and go off of the concrete part into the dirt path part, you have the cactus, you have the mesquite and then the cactus. And so this light's dappled through the mesquite, and it's one of the most beautiful places I've been to. So there are places here. I say that, I leave the valley and I go to the beautiful places, or I go to the West Coast and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so beautiful. How amazing would it be to live here all the time? But we have a lot of beauty here too. I think it's about getting off of the concrete, off of the strip malls, off of the highway, and really looking for it and appreciating it. We have a lot. Yeah. Yeah.
I've been looking at your paintings a lot. Well, first of all, I want to say great. I really love how anatomically correct all the birds are. Really
Thank you. My parents are birders. They have to be.
I love birds. But also, would it be safe to say that you prefer to use cooler tones? Because a lot of your paintings I've seen here are very blue, like almost more blue than they really would be.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I went through, so these kind of represent very different times when I was painting. The work out in front is the newer work. And so there was a time when this series, well, the green heron is very kind of a high octane kind of color for a green heron. I did kind of up the color scheme a little bit, and they almost got a little neon-y. And that was in response to the series that came before it, where everything was much more realistic, and it was kind of all browns and kind of like army greens. And I was like, I'm not sure how I'm loving that. So I think I was just kind of experimenting. I wouldn't say that I don't know. That's a good question. Who knows?
I mean, I really enjoy how much more vibrant the blues and greens are than how real nature is necessarily, because I think whenever I remember what nature looks like when I remember it, the places that I love hiking or seeing, it's much brighter and much more luminous in real life, which is a little bit more drab.
Right. Yeah, I was definitely playing around with color on those. The lark sparrows also. That was a meditation painting, so I could go kind of crazy with the colors there. But then the birds, or the ducks and the willet, and then the blue heron that's in the front, that one's all in grays, that's just what the photograph looked like, and I thought it was phenomenal. And so I just went with, and we can walk over there if you want to see some of the new work. That one that's all in grays with the reeds and then the water, that very much is within that kind of creating a space that you get lost in, and it just feels, so are those cool? Those are kind of cool. Yeah, I don't know, I never noticed, but thank you.
Only other thing would be, is there a deliberate artistic reason for you sort of isolating the birds with sort of minimal backgrounds on the water like that?
I was playing around with using the material. I did a whole series where I was using birch. These I used where I showed the linen behind it, and then I was playing around with using birch, and I started, and actually it was this series, and the birds happened at the same time. And I was interested in bringing out the wood grain, and I think that's why I did it, because I didn't want to just cover it up. I wanted the wood grain to be part of it. And at the time, I was kind of thinking a little bit about this very processed nugget from nature that still has a little bit of the echoes of nature, but is obviously very different at this point than what we would find out there.
I think the wood grain almost comes across as the water.
Yeah, that was the purpose, yeah. I mean, I think when I saw that, that's what it felt like to me, and so that's what I tried to like put up. But honestly, those are the only two that I did that with, and I haven't gone back to it. I've kind of moved in a totally different direction. So I don't know that I'll ever go back to it. We'll see.
I have a great question maybe, but when I think of the cosmic dance, in Hinduism it's linked to Shiva, who does like the cosmic dance.
Okay.
And it has very much to do with like life, death, and regeneration. But I see from plant life too, right? And I like that you were talking about the spines getting longer and that like protecting itself, and it always regenerates. Like we do not.
Okay.
In some belief systems, but
Sure.
plants do, right?
Yeah.
They're always like, all my little plants are like making babies after they die.
Yeah.
So I was just thinking about that context.
Yeah.
That's a cosmic dance in a different worldview, and then it feels like it reflects nicely off of your work when you think about the regenerative and like really the abilities of nature.
Yeah.
So I didn't know if that came up because you were talking about spirituality.
Yeah.
So it's just something I.
No, that's it. That's it. You're right. I mean, I think that's why I don't think I'll ever get tired of this subject and this space. And I can talk a little bit about like next projects and direct. I mean, I have like the rest of my life figured out, sort of. Like I can see where I plan to kind of keep doing this in different ways throughout my life. And a big part of it is going into different belief systems and seeing how these same themes are described within these different, especially in First Peoples throughout the world. I'm especially interested in eventually getting there. And I'm planning on, we were talking about like the next step from here is, I don't know exactly where I need to go, but I realize that the next step that I need to go has to be the Camino. And it's one of those where it's like, I don't know why that's where I need to go, but that's where I need to go. And I can talk about that a little bit more, but what I notice is that these themes show up. They show up in ancient texts and ancient spirituality, but it's also out there, and it's what you see. And I did this meditation for a year at Quinta. I brought this meditation painting process to whoever wanted to show up, and I shared with them what they did, or I shared with them the process, and I brought a bunch of materials, and then they went out, and I would just go and I would read a little bit of Thomas Merton, or I'd read about this, and I'd read about that, just kind of as a jumping off point, and then they would go off. And there was this one woman, I came over to her, and we started talking about it, and she started painting the growth from this log that had died, and she was older. And she started talking about how she was reflecting on the fact that she's at the end of her life, and that it's okay because she finally had a grandchild that she didn't know she was going to have, and she sees that cycle go. I mean, she and I were both crying. It was so beautiful, but she's seeing the reflection of her identity and life in not just her story, but the story, you know. So amazing, so beautiful, and the power of art to have that sort of experience, to ask those questions and to connect to how that story plays out in different ways in the natural world. I think that's what kind of keeps me going. It's so big and it's so beautiful, but you see echoes of it throughout different histories and stories and creation stories and cultures. And I do kind of feel like we're at a point, humanity is, where how wonderful to start weaving those together, you know? Might be kind of interesting. Thank you. Any other questions?
I have another question, but it's like,
Please.
So some of these are done through the meditative process called meditative painting.
Yeah, sure.
Are they easy to distinguish when you see one that is done through that process and one's not?
Absolutely.
I don't know if you talked about that.
Yeah, so this is one that was done, that was a meditation piece. So you can see real easily, it's very different than something like this. This is done from a photograph. They're loose, they're high energy, it's just kind of, and that one there, though these two also. Well, actually, this one is, The backgrounds of these are as well. So I ended up writing some quotes over them. Those are the only ones in this show that are of that. And then it kind of ends up informing what I end up selecting in the photograph that I end up turning into a painting. So it informs the composition. Yes?
Do you use any sort of reference for the birds beyond any photographs, or is it more?
I do sometimes. Sometimes the photograph just doesn't get you to where it needs to be. It might not be as clear as I need it to be. So yeah, I'll go online and kind of look for references. But for the most part, I just do the photos. And I work for my own photos. And because I'm not clever or creative, I just do what I see. And then what ends up happening is that the photograph evokes what I already know about the space. So because I'm painting what I already know, if I don't quite see the photograph, I fill in with my own experience and my own memory of it.
Sorry, I'm really not on the birds.
No, I hear. Did you see the ones in the front?
Yeah. They're really good.
Thank you. So those were from, well, the plover was in, so my parents are birders, and when I was on the island, I would like send messages to my mom. I'm like, okay, Mom, what is this? And then she would send back a message. She goes, well, that is this, and it's not supposed to be here. It's supposed to have migrated a long time ago. You know, so she helps get me like information as far as behavior, and yeah, if they weren't accurate, my parents would hold me accountable. Yeah. Yes.
I'm sorry, we were a bit late too, but I understand that you're also promoting a workshop, or what is it that you're...
Well, it's that, so if anybody's interested, this is just, I just put this together because I'm working, you know what, this is another thing for you guys to think about as artists and art students. Doing residencies are, you know, so interesting. They're very transformative. My summer residency on the island was very, very transformative for me this past summer. And then as okay, it's a weird life. 16-hour days on end, not seeing anybody, crying in my studio, painting, listening to audiobooks, writing a lot. I'm thinking about, as I'm learning about indigenous histories and wisdom, it becomes clearer and clearer to me that, you know, what does it mean that I was born and raised and claim a home that is stolen land? And so I don't know what to do with that, but I can't ignore it. And so I want to travel around the world, but I need to address that first. I need to understand, I don't know, and then enter into that idea with the same spirit that I enter into the nature, right? I have no idea what's going to come out of this. I don't have a solution. I'm not really looking for solutions. I'm showing up as a student in a very vulnerable way to just see what I have to learn within that space. Oh my gosh. So I did a DNA test. The results were surprising. At some point, I'm sure I will share what surprised me about it. No, I'm not ready to do that yet. But I had always heard, my mother's family is from Puerto Rico. My dad's family is Scottish going back to the 1600s. And when I was in Galicia in college, Galicia is the northwest corner of Spain. They share a big influence with Portugal, but also all of the Celtic nations. It was a big trade route. For the first time in my life, because I'm from here, so for the first time in my life when I was in Galicia, I looked like everybody that I was surrounded by. And it was, I can't tell you what it's like to always feel like you are an outsider in your own home, and then go to a place where all of a sudden you look like the people you're surrounded by. It was really interesting. And my grandmother always told me that her family from Puerto Rico, they were originally from Galicia. So when I'm thinking about identity, when I'm thinking about what does it mean to be of European descent, living in Turtle Island is the name that some indigenous peoples call North and Central America. So I'm thinking, I'm wanting to go there and look at the landscapes in this space. while I'm wanting to honor the history of the Americas. And so this project is called El Camino via Turtle Island. And so it's this idea that I am from here, but I want to walk the Camino de Santiago, which goes back centuries. People, like hundreds of thousands of people walk the Camino every year. And I want to do it the Camino Inglés, which is where my dad's ancestors in Ireland and Scotland and Wales would have landed in Spain and walked down to the Camino, to Santiago. And so that's where I knew I needed to be. I don't know why I know, I know that that's where I need to be. And so I have created my own residency this year. I came up with my own proposal. I'm going around, I'm saying, okay, I want sponsors because I need to figure out how to pay for this. And I'm offering artwork and different things at different levels for people. And I had somebody say, well, can you do that? I went, we're gonna see. And I think that's, I'm finally, it took me like a while, it took me at least 40 years. But I finally got to a point where I'm no longer asking permission. I'm going, you know what, I have lived enough to know that when my heart tells me you need to go in this direction, trust it. And for whatever reason, this is where my heart's telling me to go. And then the rest of the time I just trust. Like, I don't know how it's gonna work out, but I know it's gonna work out. And I'm really, really excited about this project. Again, I have no idea how it's gonna work out, but I'm gonna just go with it. So this, I just in the past couple of days, I went ahead and put together the little description on my website and on my Shopify to get sponsors. And then I just went ahead and made this. So this is like a little thing if you guys are interested in checking out the website, and you can see and follow along with the journey, and it's kind of something that's going on. So we'll see what happens with that. Yeah. Any other questions?
Are you doing any more Kita Mastermind workshops?
I don't have anything scheduled. So if they wanted to bring me on, I'm open to that, but nothing scheduled right now. Yeah. Yeah. But also if like, I'm always open to doing something like that. So if there's a group that's really interested, just let me know. We can kind of figure something out. Yeah.
Is it, do you mostly, so when you're doing your work, do you do a lot of live painting there? Or do you bring a lot home to the studio? Or is it a big mix of both?
So I do the meditation paintings there. I throw away maybe 4 out of 5 of the meditation paintings. Most of them don't, or it's just process. A few of them are really cool and I keep them, but most of them I get rid of. And then I photograph. So when I was on the island, my schedule was to kind of walk around, photograph, set up and paint, come back during the middle of the day. I would go through my photos, I would read, I would write, and then I would redo the journey. And then the paintings all come from photographs. But what I choose to photograph and how I choose to create the composition is based on what I learned during my meditation pieces.
And I'm trying to get better at just like being there, seeing things,
Yeah.
trying to paint, you know, but as you can imagine, just like, oh man, just, you know, it's like your third time being outside painting.
Yeah, yeah.
You're still getting used to the whole everything. And
Yeah.
I don't know, just learning the process of being there and trying to study from like the old, you know, masters of painting in plein air.
Right.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
even learning, like, looking at what other people bring along with them.
Okay,
Instead of
yeah.
being with a whole box and a bag.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
I've,
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
shrunk it down to the essentials.
Yeah. That's fun because you got to carry it all.
Yeah, and then
Yeah, it's
also
heavy.
You kind of like also get to capture a bit of like, I was in the heat that day. This is what it felt like, you know?
Yeah.
I was here at this place and this is the feeling. It's not even just like a memory. It's like still there.
Right.
You know what I mean? If you go to this place, you try to capture it.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I get when
Yeah,
I start
yeah.
to paint these landscapes, you know?
Yeah.
And even though I've been going to more like a park that's in a town, in a neighborhood or near like downtown McAllen, but you can still see glimpses of like, well, that's a recognizable symbol of something, you know what I mean? Like, which I think is really cool because you can kind of like, yeah, I've been there, I've walked by there 100 times, I've driven by there, but I've never looked at it in a painting to really like appreciate it. And I get that in a bit of your stuff too, like
Yeah.
the grasses, the
Yeah.
animals, the trees, like, you know, just like the actual symmetry of them and stuff. stuff like that. I think it's a pretty awesome process to get to like appreciate a landscape for being what it is.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, once I paint a bird, I know it forever because you pay attention to it in a certain way. And what I noticed is when I paint on location, like I started when I traveled, like over 20 years ago when I was traveling. If I look at one of these paintings, even if it's a nothing painting, I remember everything about that day. I remember the wind, I remember what I was hearing, I remember who was playing back here, because it kind of gets into your brain in a different way that's really, really beautiful. But plein air painting is a very specific technique that I don't do because my pieces take probably, an oil painting takes at least 7 layers. And it takes me months to create. That's just the way I work and what makes sense to me through my process. So the plein air is never, I don't know how to do it. I don't know how people do it. Like, it's really hard. But if you find, there's somewhere in Texas, there's a plein air convention. If you Google it, you'll find it. And it's all these plein air artists, they all get together and they all work. That might be something you'd like to check out.
Something I've been trying to grow foster too. I'm the president of the art club, and I'm trying to we should all go to this park on this day, like let's all meet up and just like hang out, bring whatever you want to bring, just go about the area. Because I don't know, part of it does feel too a bit of like, you can bring people along, it just makes that much better. But I don't know, I like working with people. That's just the school system, like showing me in a class with 20 other people.
Yeah.
Whenever you're alone, you're just a little a little bit what you talked about earlier about like having to impress. You know, there's that feeling of like, well, I gotta make something here. Because I'm here.
Yeah. You know, I realized being on the island, so much of an artist's work is internal. You have to get into that right space because it doesn't matter your skill set, but if you're not in that right space, if you're wanting to be impressive, if you're wanting to control it too much, it's like, have you thrown on ceramics?
A bit.
Okay, so when you're centering clay, if you push too hard, you throw it off center, but if you're not strong enough, it wobbles you around. So you have to be kind of in the middle. And I think that's such a beautiful metaphor for life and for creating art. You know, you want to really know who you are, but you can't control too much because it's never going to come out.
Yeah, it goes back to like, why are you making this? What are you trying to get out of it?
Yeah.
Are you trying to get something out of it? You know, or are you just making to make?
Right.
It's definitely a question.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Just a question.
Yeah, shoot.
Why did you choose to do oil? On most of them, it's oil on linen, oil on canvas, etc.
Yeah, do you work with oil at all?
I do not.
Okay.
So I was just wondering why.
So I started painting with oil when I was 8. I've been doing oil for a really long time. And my works, oftentimes they start off with graphite and then acrylic, and then I get to oil. And for some reason, when I start with the oil, something shifts and it's so much more joyful. The control of it is very different. There's a luminosity to it. There's a richness to it that really no other medium does. And I think the joy that I get in it shows me that 100% this is my medium. That's why I'm an oil painter. So that's why I do oils. Yeah, I love it. It's also the easiest, I feel like. I think it's by far the easiest medium because it takes a while to dry. So you have a strong window. If you do something you don't like it, you wipe it back up. You can go thin, you can go thick.
So it's very flexible.
It's very flexible. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, try it.
Cool.
Try it. I love it.
Money.
Yeah.
Take a painting class. If you take a painting class, that's what you'll be doing.
It's not in my pages.
You do it on your own.
He seems to like this a lot.
Yeah.